Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber from inside the state capitol as the legislative session rolls on. I'm your host, Rick Lord, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that has a lot of people talking. It's colloquially known as the library bill and would, among other things, possibly set jail time for people who don't abide by it, and we'll kind of dig into the details of what would trigger that kind of mechanism. But joining me today, Brandon Steele, who ran this bill in the House, and Delegate Sean Fluharty. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. Brandon, I want to begin with you. Just talk a little bit about the genesis of this bill, why you think it was necessary, and what it would and would not do for material in libraries.
Thank you, Rick. It's the actual title of the bill is exemptions from the previous section of code. So the bill deals with 618A3, which is exemptions to 618A2. 618A2 prevents the presentation of obscene material to a minor, which is strictly defined as something of prurient interest only, has no artistic, literary, scientific, educational value. So once you get to three provides some exemptions. There's exemptions for law enforcement, psychiatrists and psychologists that are working through cases that involve children who've been presented obscene material. There's exemptions for purveyors of prurient material, that if they've taken appropriate steps to make sure that minors are not looking at this type of material or not presented with this type of material, they're given exceptions. But then there's also an exception for bona fide schools, museums, and public libraries. And what I had librarians come to me in my district and said, hey, this is getting abused. There are folks coming into the library and presenting material to minors, and specifically using a library or a school library or something like that.
Now, how would they be presenting material? Are you talking about someone coming in and setting up like a booth or something?
Something of that nature. And what we have in code is essentially a sanctuary for that criminal activity to happen. So if you go back to 618A2, there's nobody here that's debating getting rid of the crime of presenting obscene material to minors. What we're talking about is taking away a sanctuary where if it's a crime in the parking lot of the library, it should be a crime in the building. If it's a crime for me to present that material to children at home, it should be a crime for me to do it in a library or a school. That's what the bill's about. It's not about putting librarians in trouble or banning books. As a matter of fact,
penalties.
As a matter of fact, the criminal penalties are actually in 618A2, which are not even being amended, to your point. What is being amended is we're taking away the sanctuaries for pedophiles to present material to minors in these safe spaces.
Have there been any instances in West Virginia of that happening in
Absolutely.
libraries?
If we looked at the public hearing, you heard from a score of librarians that gave graphic depictions of what was going on in the libraries and the schools and the material that was getting presented to minors. And if you look at that, why is that conduct wrong? Well, psychologists, law enforcement, everybody can tell you that the act of showing pornography to minors, obscene material, and when we say prurient, what has our Supreme Court said about that? That is a material that has no literary, scientific, educational value or artistic value, that is solely for sexual gratification or sexual arousal. So we're not talking about books that might have, some type of controversial topic in it. We're talking about pure pornography. And when people are presenting pure pornography to minors, what they're actually doing is grooming them, desensitizing them, and making that child more subject to sexual abuse and sexual assault.
I want to give Delegate Fluharty a chance to talk here, because I know you're chomping at the bit to get into this. I want to unpack a few things first.
Sure.
Basically, what you're laying out is you want to keep pornography out of libraries.
Yes.
There would be an argument to be made that who determines what that line is. Because anytime
is that
you
the Bible? Are we banning the Bible now from libraries? Because you could argue that's what's happening.
When you get to things that are open to interpretation in law and in code, sometimes there can be gray areas, and that can create a slippery slope. Number two, you said that there were instances of people talking about this happening in libraries in West Virginia. I don't think anyone argues that we want to keep. There's a difference between presenting anal sex to sixth graders or To Kill a Mockingbird. There's a huge spectrum here. And I think some arguments are, well, let's not go down this slippery slope. You don't want to get into where you're starting to censor things based on interpretation.
The people presenting those arguments are ignoring 618A1, which defines that material as something of purely a prurient interest that the average person, when looking at it, can't.
Let's give delegates. Is this bill necessary?
Hell no, this bill's not necessary. This bill's been sitting for a couple years. Just so happens it comes out in an election year. Just so happens. If it was in the library right now, it'd be in the fiction section, because it's nonsensical, it's complete lies, it's not reality. But the reality is big government Republicans are controlling you from day to night. They care about who you're sleeping with, what's going on in your bedroom, what's going on in the doctor's office, and now what's going on in the libraries. And they want to lock up librarians for up to 5 years. So what happens?
Could that happen?
That's what's in the language of the bill.
Well, actually, no, that is not in the language of the bill.
Up to 5 years.
Up to 5 years is in 618A2. 618A2, the crime that has been around for a very long time, is not in the bill.
And it would hold a librarian accountable.
What the bill would do is remove the exception for public libraries, bona fide schools, and museums. So yes, a librarian could be held accountable if they were presenting purely prurient material to a minor. What you have set up in code right now is a sanctuary for pedophiles. And to sit here and say that big government is wanting to take away your right to do what... Yes, I do want to take away the right of someone to groom a minor to try to sexually abuse them.
No.
This isn't about that.
So
this is about
how
people...
exactly would this work?
I don't understand how anyone can logically think that the presentation of this material outside a library is somehow okay inside.
I think the question becomes who makes that decision?
12 jurors.
So if the librarian now has books in there that big government Republicans deem to be obscene, and how exactly are they going to monitor every single book that comes in? They already have procedures in place when children come in a library. If you actually talk to librarians, they have procedures in place that if a child comes in who does not come in with an adult, is not supervised, they have procedures in place to make sure the child is monitored and not going through books of prurient interest.
And beyond that,
and that's why we allow librarians to put their own procedures in place. Now we're saying the government's here to help.
And is there not a mechanism already in place for things like pornography, where if someone can fill out a form or say object to something that's being presented in the library, that a panel
local
or
libraries may have that, but what you have in code right now is a sanctuary that basically says you can't be charged with a crime in this building if you're presenting obscene material to minors.
So you're removing that sanctuary.
That is all that's happening. If it's a crime outside the building, it's a crime inside the building.
These bills have popped up throughout the country. A lot of similar groups and people go around the country reading the same passages from the same books, talking about all these bad things that are happening, even though it's not actually happening in West Virginia. But what's happening is, in a state like Utah, where a similar bill was passed, they banned the Bible. So where do we stop? I never thought I'd be sitting here in West Virginia where Republicans are potentially banning the Bible. Blows my mind.
That is a logical fallacy. First, no one's going into a Sunday school and arresting Sunday school teachers for reading the Bible. No parent is getting their kids taken away from them for reading the Bible at home to them. Anybody can go out on the street and read the Bible, and they're not getting arrested under 618A2. As a matter of fact, no one's getting arrested for the Bible, and by removing this exemption, no one would get arrested in a library or public school for reading the Bible. And this is really interesting coming from people that want to remove the Bible from schools. So that's neat.
Is it a form of censorship? I know that a big Republican talking point nationwide, especially online and on Twitter, has been, that big tech has been censoring Republican voices on Twitter, on what's now X, and so that was a big movement to open that up to all forums. Let the people decide. Let there be a marketplace of ideas. Does this not go against that, where now it seems like Republicans are saying we do want to censor things? No, this is about protecting
children from sexual predators. That's all this bill's about. This does not ban a single book. This does not tell a librarian a list of books that you can't have. All this says is, if you go into a library or to a school or to a museum and present pornography to minors, you no longer have a sanctuary. You will be subject to the provisions of 618A2, at which point law enforcement, a prosecutor, a judge, and 12 jurors will have to determine if you committed a crime or not.
That's not happening. That's not a thing. It happens about as often as you see the Loch Ness Monster, Jim Justice shows up at the Capitol for work. These are not things that are happening. And here's what we do in this country, in particular in West Virginia, during election years. We manufacture outrage. This bill, love Brandon, but this bill is manufactured outrage, because now what it'll be is it's about pornography and children.
So
these
you're
things.
saying it's something they can put on a mailer?
It's manufactured nonsense. It'll be a political mailer in November and the boogeyman argument, and then we'll move on to something else next week. Like, that's what we do. Keep everybody angry at each other. The neighbors angry at each other. This is also about political ideology. If you look at what's happening in other states where these bills are being passed, there's no, it's calming effect on the libraries and librarians and what's inside the library. And if you look at the list of books they're really concerned about, it's about political ideologies. And then you read about these things in the libraries in third world countries. Is where you read about these things.
I want to segue into something, and I know that you gentlemen haven't really had a chance to look at the bill yet, but it's something that made headlines earlier this week with the governor talking about it. They're dubbing it the Women's Bill of Rights, and essentially it's moving along those lines of making sure that trans girls can't play sports against girls, that whatever your biological sex is, that would be where you have to play. If you were born a girl, you play with girls. If you were born a boy, you play with boys. Again, the argument against this is it seems to be a problem that isn't a problem in West Virginia, a solution looking for a problem. Where do you stand on that issue?
Didn't we pass that bill a couple years ago?
There are...
This is old news.
Yeah, right.
We've already passed this bill and it's done, and there's no problems with it.
So, yeah, dubbing it...
I think more people have problems with the 4A classification back where I'm from.
So did you think this was just like a photo op from the governor? I mean, is it just like...
I didn't have a chance to see it, Rick. I couldn't really comment on it.
Sean, I know
I pulled the bill up after the governor had
cursory look at
photo op yesterday. You know, and I agree with Brandon. I thought we already addressed this. But, you know, the governor's running for U.S. Senate, so he's going to use every chance to have a photo op. He did yesterday. I think we've picked out about 3 examples out of 330 million people where this has happened. Not in West Virginia, but let's hurry up and have a bill called the Women's Bill of Rights. Nothing in there about equal pay. Nothing in there about the ability to have medical care. You know, nothing in there on things that if you actually talk to women, they're concerned about. Right? And they call it the Women's Bill of Rights. I mean, that's a bill of lies is what this really is. It's not a bill of rights. It's insane to me. If we're actually going to protect women, protect women. They care more about women's sports than they do actually women. That's the problem we're having right now. And this bill is a do-nothing bill. And, you know, it does have something in there that I thought was very troubling to me, and Brandon probably will as well. It's about data collection. Data collection that the state's going to have on children outside of just their biological sex. I mean, is there a nook cranny anywhere in this state that Republicans aren't going into yet? Like, I think we're in a bizarre world now where I thought Democrats were big government people. Turns out, once you get a little bit of power, big government Republicans have taken over the legislature.
I don't think anybody has exclusivity on that.
They have a supermajority in the running bills that are in every part of your life from day to night.
Is there not an argument to be made, though, if you look at it just from a reasonable standpoint, that there is a difference between boys and girls, especially once they've gone through puberty, that we are in many cases possibly putting girls at danger if they're playing against competitive sports, right?
We took care of that a couple years ago. I have not had a chance to see this bill, so it's going to be hard for me to talk about it, but I can tell you.
But again, it just goes into kind of what we were talking about. It seems like they're just drumming things up.
One of the things Sean brought up was the
outrage.
Data collection. That's something I've historically been against. Sean can even tell you.
Yep.
I've even voted, against some of the bills that have been put forth by my party that are pointed at collecting data, turning it into the federal government. I'm not for that. I fought against data collection on folks, for the entire 6 years I've been here. So, I think it's something that as we, if this bill does come up, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets worked pretty hard in our committee and judiciary. And, you'd be surprised to think we don't always disagree.
No.
We disagree on this.
And I appreciate
we disagree on, manufactured outrage bills that I think are for political points.
Or keeping
but
pedophiles
Brandon
out of the
and I
schools.
Actually, we get along really well, and this is that's how it should work when we're on, when we're on the same
what?
side
Being
of it.
animated makes for good video. So while I have you in this mood, let me
you
segue.
have the 2 best speakers in the house.
Okay. Modest over here as well. Kind of morphing into another Republican talking point that's become a talker nationwide, and you're seeing it again on Twitter now, especially with Mark Cuban getting into arguments with all these people. DEI, it's something that's a big talking point. Diversity, equity, inclusion in the workforce. The goal is to diversify the workforce to try to make it look more like the general public. In principle, I think most people would say, hey, that's not a bad idea as long as you're not sacrificing competence to check a box. And I think that's what the argument here becomes. And there seems to be a disconnect between people saying, well, the spirit of the rule is this, which I think everyone can agree on, but what we're seeing in practice is actually trying to fight discrimination with a different type of discrimination. What's your take on what we're seeing?
I think it goes back to the old affirmative action arguments, back in the 90s that, I think it's more something that the free market, can really take care of, as companies set up their policies. If they want to have that policy, allow them to have it. I think from a government standpoint, we should probably just let the free market make that determination themselves. If they want to have these types of policies and want to make hiring practices on that, that's their business to do. At the same time, I think we need to be cautious because the same protections that we have in place for African Americans, for women, for people of other nationalities, religions, so forth, those could become to be infringed upon in an effort for someone to comply with a different law that requires this other type of inclusion. So to me, it's more of a thing of, we ought to be cautious with that due to the fact that a lot of times the free market will work these things out. If people are making decisions on employment that are discriminatory and things like that, the public's going to figure that out, and they're not going to patronize those businesses. And I think that's ultimately the way it should play out.
It's almost turned into a semantic argument with people saying, well, the E, equity, there's a difference between equality and equity.
Cuban going at it on X, Twitter, whatever.
Yeah, I think we have to call it X now.
Yeah, and I've seen him going back and forth on that. Look, he's a successful guy, and I agree with Brandon. The government should stay out of the way when it comes to those decisions Fortune 500 companies are making. And if you look at what decisions they're making, they're going more diverse. I wish this legislature was more diverse.
But if they're breaking the law, that's different. And if
run harder.
If they're breaking discrimination laws, is that
here.
not different, though? And discrimination can go both ways. I mean, if they're purposely not hiring someone based on their gender or the color of their skin, is that not illegal?
And that's what I'm talking about. There could be a
real
real conflict between the current law we have and
So
a
it
new
needs to be
law
tightened
that
up,
would,
maybe?
Well, the
Better
two
language?
ideas are actually in conflict with one another. To say we're not going to base our employment decisions on these criteria and then have another law say we're basing our employment decisions on these criteria, you can't have that. Those are two codes that can't coexist. One of them has to prevail.
All right. Are you guys going to get along for the next couple of months?
We've gotten along for 6 years. We're doing great.
All right. Delegates Brandon Steele and Sean Fluharty, thank you for your time, gentlemen. Can I get a handshake?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. And we look forward to the continued debate in the House.
I think we'll see it here soon.
We'll be right back with more Echo Chamber after this.
At Dutch Miller Automotive, we've grown quite a bit over the last 60 years, but our core principles remain the same. We believe in treating our customers and our team members like friends and family, and we see it as our obligation to give back to all the communities we are so fortunate to do business in. In just West Virginia alone, we've grown from one location on the west end of Huntington to 10 rooftops employing more than 500 Mountaineers. Check out the inventory from all of our stores at DutchMillerAuto.com. Dutch Miller Automotive Group, West Virginia proud.
At CAMC, our focus has always been on building better healthcare for you. Our new Center for Learning and Research combines cutting-edge technology with hands-on experience for physicians, nurses, and other caregivers. Using specially designed simulation rooms and robotics with expert instruction, our learners expand their expertise. Because you deserve the most advanced care possible, now and in the years to come. Welcome to the future of medicine.
The HD Media Plus app is your ticket to see all the action on the hard court as it happens.
Saunders with the three. Sam makes it in! Sam from three buries it off the glass! And the Red
Dozens of live games that you won't see anywhere else, featuring some of the best teams in the state. Watch the game live or later at your convenience, and the best part, it's free. Download the HD Media Plus app today to your smartphone or TV so you won't miss another shot. Welcome back inside the state capitol as we continue with this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. And joining me now is Senator Ryan Weld to talk about a couple of bills that he's running that deal with veterans. And, off camera, you were telling me that really you have to give credit to other people for these bills. You are the one running them, but the genesis of this came from other people.
Yep. So the
222 and 261.
So 222 is the mortgage bill. I can never remember the number. So
222 is the bill that offers incentives to veterans and gives them discounts at state parks.
Okay, so 222, what it does is it directs tourism to work with the Department of Veterans Assistance to come up with a plan for putting together discounts at state parks in respect for lodging, for campground facilities, or other park activities for veterans, active duty members, and their families. The bill originally came from former Minority Leader Stephen Baldwin from Greenbrier County, and Stephen had that bill, and I'm the chair of the Military Committee in the Senate.
You have a military background.
Yep, I was an Air Force guy, and so Stephen had that bill for a number of years, and we were never able to get it across the finish line. Got it over to the House, I think once or twice, just weren't able to get it done. And so I've carried that bill over. He is no longer a member of the Senate, but I was happy to pick up that cause for him, and so we made some changes this year to it, working with tourism to change exactly what the program would look at giving a discount for, and we passed that out of the Senate yesterday. And I think it's good, Rick, because a lot of studies have shown that if someone is suffering from PTSD or has some issues from their time in the military, getting outdoors, spending time outdoors, hunting, fishing, camping, really helps with PTSD and really helps somebody who might be suffering from some mental or emotional issues. And so I think it's not just, hey, we're giving you a freebie. It's, hey, we're helping you do the things that will help you.
And that's what it's important, because it's not just a token of appreciation and hey, let's give something back to these guys and gals, but it's also giving them something to do that's constructive and can help them with many issues. Do you have any of the details specifically, like how much money we're looking at saving? How's that program going to look?
So really what has to happen is that they'll put the program together, and then they have to present it to the Joint Government and Finance Committee. It's an interim committee, and they'll present that to us, and we'll take a look at it, because costs will only be determined after that, because are they giving half off, a third off, or how? So we'll just take a look at it then, and maybe we'll need to take legislative action. Or maybe we won't, and we'll see what the fiscal impact would be, but we won't really know until then.
And those types of things are tough to budget, because when you're on something like admission, there's no real cost to letting a person into your facility, so you don't really. It would determine.
You're really just trying to project out what would be lost in terms of
what you could have had that person paid full price.
Yeah, we have 100 people normally coming in paying full boat, but now only 50 of them will be out.
All right, and 261, I believe, is a loan program for veterans. Talk a little bit about that and what that does.
And so that bill came from Montana. They had the Veterans Mortgage Program out there, and what it does is, oftentimes we talk in terms of, really like to do that program, we just don't have the money. This is unique in that it's not going to cost the state new monies, because I worked with the Housing Development Fund and our state treasurer we have the Unclaimed Property Trust Fund. And so that the amount of money that is in that fund is well above what is people claim throughout the year. And so that money, we're going to transfer a portion of that money out of that account into a new account that we created. That will then serve as the funding for these mortgages. And the biggest part of this is that the mortgages that will be offered to veterans, active duty members, and certain members of their family will be at an interest rate that is 1% lower than the best interest rate that is currently being offered by the West Virginia Housing Development Fund. Okay. And right now, on a 30-year fixed, you're looking at maybe 7.4%.
Right. Very high right now, but it has been as low as 3% just a few years ago.
Yes, and so 1%. If you're looking at a $200,000 home, you put $40,000 down. Between 7.4 and 6.4, you're looking at right around $150, maybe $200 a month.
I was told there would be no math, Ryan.
Well, that's about as deep as I can get. That's why I went to law school. That's as deep as I can get into it.
But we're talking about some real savings here.
Yeah.
Especially over the cost of the loans. Yep. So just another way to say thank you to these veterans.
Yep. And we have talked in terms, a lot of these kind of came about, if you remember last year, we were kind of in danger of losing a lot of the programs and facilities through the VA healthcare program here in West Virginia. And one of the things that was cited in that was that we have a declining veteran population. So these two bills are part and parcel of a larger package to try to make West Virginia as attractive as possible to veterans and their families, and even active duty members. Because look at the Eastern Panhandle and the increase in population that we've had out there, because those people are looking, to try to get out of the high prices of Maryland and DC and Northern Virginia. And so a lot of them are people who work for the government and some active duty members.
And that all goes along with the economic stimulus that you guys are trying to create. It goes hand in hand. You start bringing more people in, retail follows, and then these corporations start taking notice, and then you can get some places to set up shop there in the Eastern Panhandle, and then that just kind of snowballs. Is that something that can be maybe come down to the southern part of the state eventually? Or?
Yeah, I think that it can, anywhere is possible. I mean, we have the joint, guard base right up the road from us. And I know there are a number of things that are being looked at in terms of expanding operations there and that the personnel that are located there. And we have defense contractors in West Virginia as well. And what are a lot of defense contractors? Veterans.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of opportunities there. And we are looking to obviously retain and attract a wide variety of people to West Virginia. But because of my experience and what I do in the Senate, this is the one demographic that I've chosen to focus on.
Well, and it's a core belief in West Virginia. We've always had a backing of the military. I mean, you can't. There's not many degrees of separation. You talk to anyone in West Virginia, they know someone or know someone who knows someone who served or is in the military, has a military background. So it's certainly something that I think would resonate with a lot of people around.
Yeah.
Are there any bills that you're thinking of running beyond this that would have to deal with military?
The governor talked about offering in-state tuition to veterans and their families during the State of the State, and that would be, I think, a tremendous asset for West Virginia. I personally would like to see an exemption bill for certain disabled veterans, maybe those who have a 90 or 100% rating from the VA, or for the family members of someone who was killed in the line of duty, to be able to exempt them from tuition in the state of West Virginia. There are a number of states that do that. I would really like to see that done here in West Virginia. We just passed out of the Judiciary Committee last week the joint resolution to try to get onto the ballot a constitutional amendment for disabled veterans and homestead real estate tax. Because right now, 90 and 100% disabled veterans are exempt from paying that, but because of our constitutional requirements, they still have to pay the tax to the county and then file an income tax with the state of West Virginia. It's either a credit or a refundable credit. So it's kind of a clunky process. So I would
streamline that.
Yeah, so I'd really like to get that constitutional amendment passed and streamline that for those who seek that credit.
All right, well, you certainly have a lot of say in the Senate. When I talk to people about, you could probably, on one hand, list of people that are making things move over there. While I have you here, I want to talk a little bit. Last week we had the WVSSAC on, and we were talking a little bit about the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. I know that was something that and everyone gives you credit, even if they are against it. They say, that was the cleverly crafted bill. So you're getting a lot of credit for the way you put that together. There are a lot of people, however, that believe that it needs to be tweaked, that it needs to be modified, that the rule in spirit has not turned into something that's being practical at this point, that we're seeing kids, the competitive imbalance has become too much. In football, some kids are going to one school for the start of the year in football and then moving and playing basketball at a different school. Long story short, there are a lot of people that would like to see something done. The House seems pretty convinced that they could get something done, but they're not sure if the Senate would.
Well, I don't think the Senate is interested at this point in taking school choice away from parents in West Virginia.
And the reason you bring that up is because that specific bill was coupled with the Hope Scholarship.
And so there are a lot, particularly in this area. I haven't heard of any issues with or concerns about this in any other area of the state except the Charleston area. And a lot of the concerns is emotional and not factual. And so when I look at things here, I have to look at facts. And people say, well, what about these scores, these lopsided scores that occurred this season? Well, then I had a list of scores from the 2022 season that were extremely lopsided.
Perhaps not to this extent, though.
Well, I would think that if you have, my stepfather was a high school football coach for longer than I've been alive. And I talked to him about it. He said, there are a lot of times where I could have scored that many points, but I didn't because there was no need to. And so I think that if you don't, maybe you have a personnel issue instead of, or a personality issue instead of a player issue.
Is there a way to tweak it though to keep what you're saying, the school choice, the freedom to go to where you want to go and play where you want to play, to maybe tighten up some of the language or put something in there that kind of at least puts some restrictions in place so that it's not as unencumbered as it is right now?
So here's what I would say, and this is where someone who's a very big critic of the legislation, and he and I agree on. There should be absolutely no recruiting in high school athletics, none. And if the SSAC called me tomorrow and said, Senator Watt, we want you to write the strongest piece of anti-recruiting legislation in the country, I'd sit down and happily do it with them. And if they said we need some sort of mechanism for enforcement as a staff member, I'd be all for it, because nobody should be recruiting athletes, and we need to make sure of that on the high school level. I think the other question as well, Rick, is if I were a school that had lost a kid or two, the question that nobody's asking in this is why? Why are these kids transferring from our school to go to another school?
Facilities sometimes.
Are they opportunities that we just don't have? Is it, a coaching staff that doesn't allow for them to make the best or make the most of their talents and present an opportunity for them for the future after high school? Those are the questions that nobody is asking, that I would love to see people talking about, is what can we do then to make sure that all these schools have opportunities and make them all better?
Well, a lot of these schools just don't have the money to put it in their facilities. So, it's like the shiny keys dangling over here. The kid sees what's going on at this school. Oh, my goodness, they have an elevator in their clubhouse.
And that might be the case, but I also think about my own experience. I went to Brook, and I was a swimmer in high school. I swam in college. And there were a lot of schools around that I could have potentially gone to that had their own pools. And with Brook, we drove a school bus 25 to 30 minutes every day to West Liberty to practice in a 4-lane pool that was dimly lit. But that was my team, that was my school. Sure. So I don't know if it's always a facilities issue, but instead of just what kind of opportunities are we not presenting our students, and how can we make them better, because it's also incumbent upon us.
And it's tough. Some things can't be legislated, some things can't be policed, but a lot of these smaller communities are feeling that they're losing a lot. Maybe something to look into, maybe something to try to tweak. Moving on to the Hope Scholarship, which was kind of tied into that, there has been some talk about possibly expanding that. Where do we stand on that? Is that something that you would back to open that up to more
I'd
kids?
have to look at, I'm not on the education or the finance committee, so if those conversations are being had right now on either one of those committees, or if numbers are being looked at, I'm not aware.
Is that something that you would back, to open it up to more kids? Because right now it's limited to kids that are entering kindergarten for if you want to use it for like a private school. There's other workarounds. You could do virtual schooling and to get a dual exemption.
I got to be honest with you. I would have to look at two things. What are the finances? What would it cost?
Does the money work?
Yeah. What do we have? Is what we're doing now working or not working? There are just a lot of questions that I would have to...
What's the feedback been so far that you've gotten from parents on opening that up to be able to use for private school?
I have to be honest, in my neck of the woods, it really hasn't been something that has been at the forefront of discussions with parents. We have a lot of opportunities for private schools in my district. A lot of them are Catholic schools, Catholic grade schools. We have a couple of Catholic high schools. But we have some non-religious schools as well, like Lindsley. But the Hope Scholarship really hasn't been a huge topic that constituents have brought to me one side of the issue or the other, to be honest with you.
Does it tie into your belief, though, of school choice, of being able to choose where you want to be able to go to school?
I think that people should be able to choose, parents should be able to choose what the best opportunity is for their child. But also, we have to look at if state resources are being used, are they being used in the best way? Are we able to fund that and the other things that we need to? In the Senate, you're either on finance or you're on judiciary. I'm the vice chair of judiciary, and so I'm not as well versed on the numbers as a lot of other people.
It goes back to the math thing for us.
It is. It is the math thing.
All right. Well, Senator Ryan Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, as always. I'm sure we'll be circling back to other issues.
Always a pleasure.
Throughout the rest of the session, and I'm sure that the veterans are thanking you for what you're doing for them with these bills.
We all need to thank them as well, so thank you.
Senator Ryan Well, and we'll be right back with more Outside the Echo Chamber after this.
When it comes to surgical care, you want the best hands behind the robot. And those are ours. Choose Mon Health. Feel the difference.
Are you ready to unlock a future filled with remarkable pay, unbeatable benefits, and unparalleled satisfaction? Imagine embarking on a journey that offers you a college-level education without the weight of debt, all while earning a steady income. Look no further than the West Virginia Building and Construction Trades Apprenticeship Programs. Join us, and together, let's build a future that's brighter and stronger. Go to actwv.org to apply today. The West Virginia Building and Construction Trades, where the future is forged.
Back inside the state capitol, that's going to do it for another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. A passionate debate today. We want to thank our guests, Delegates Brandon Steele and Sean Fluharty, and Senator Ryan Weld. But be sure to join us again. We have another episode on Thursday discussing issues important to you and your family. Until then, I'm Rick Lord. Take care.